Hi everyone, Lou Sims here and welcome today. Ever looked at the tiny stamps in your stamp set and wonder what more you can actually do with them other than the obvious? In this video, I'm going to be using just the smaller stamps. Rather than using them for filler pieces or to create extra embellishment pieces, I want to use them to do pattern building, to create mandala inspired designs. There won't be a huge focus on colouring, but it's more about how to use these smaller accessory stamps and just push them that little bit further. This is actually a set I designed a while ago called A Bit on the Side during a very different chapter in my creative journey. But even then, it really mattered to me that the smaller stamps could be used for more than just decoration, for creating backgrounds, for stamping and making into embellishments. I wanted them to have a real creative mileage, be on a creative journey themselves. That sounds a bit waffly or naff, but that's about the only way I can think of describing it. Apologies. That idea still resonates with me even when I look at this stamp set now. I've started with a basic pencil guide, just to give me, a reference point, a starting point. I'm not aiming for perfection. This is about just looking at the stamps, seeing the gaps that there are and building a pattern from it. I'm going to start in what I consider the centre, and I am going to work outwards. And I'm deliberately mixing different shapes and styles and whatever I feel fills that gap at that moment. In the video, I've kept the paper as is, and that's really just because I can then control my autofocus. However, the downside of not moving my paper is you will see my head popping in every now and then, and that's so I can place the stamps. It is much easier if you rotate your paper round because you'll be able to see your alignment a lot easier. As the stamps are hand-drawn designs that then have been created into the stamp set, sometimes you'll not get perfect placement, as in they don't have a symmetrical look to them. I think that helps that we're using stamps, but because they're not 100% symmetrical, it means it also has that hand-drawn element to it. Now, some parts of the video I have sped up, but they're the repeat pattern part. But where I start the initial pattern, I will keep that at speed so you can actually see a bit more clearly about my placement and how I do it. For me, this method of using my smaller stamps is a brilliant way to create new life into your stamp set, your stash, because suddenly you've given it a new purpose, a new look. And it also shows that the smaller stamp sets can be just as exciting on their own as the bigger stamps. And when you layer them intentionally, they become completely unique. Also, I find doing this style of stamping can become quite addictive because suddenly you start looking at the shapes and you can see other patterns or other placements, whether that's making your designs bigger or your designs smaller. As I build the layers, I'm looking for balance but not perfection. You'll notice I use different stamps to fill any small gaps and add some extra interest without hopefully making things feel too crowded but not have too much open space either. The smaller stamps are great for this. However, what's also really good is have a look at your stencils. So I've brought in a couple of stencil designs just to help me fill little gaps. So on one of the stencils, I'm using tiny little diamond shapes and dots. And on the other stencil, it has different size circles. And I'm using those where I think I need to add a little bit more detail to take away from the stamps not having a linear, regular shape to them. As I said, the stamps were hand drawn, so therefore they don't have that perfect mirror image symmetry. I think it's a word I should really use. If this sparks some ideas for you, let me know in the comments or tag me in your makes. I'd love to see what you create, not necessarily with this stamp set, but with some of your smaller stamps in stamp sets you own. Whilst this isn't a colouring tutorial, I do show a quick peek at how I started to add a little bit of colour to one of the sections. I'm using pencils. I find pencils for me, I slow down and I enjoy the process. Also, pencils for me is a great one when I haven't quite worked out in my head what colours I actually want to use. If you would like to see how I coloured the finished mandala in more detail, let me know in the comments below. I can always share another video or even a short reel showing the mandala image that we've stamped out fully coloured. If at any point it feels like the design is getting a little too busy, pause, repeat a shape, or even stop and get another piece of card or paper and begin another pattern and see what happens then. Sometimes this can spark adding extra pieces to the first pattern you started or take you down a completely new route. And that's what I did with the second pattern I created. I've gone down a completely different route with the same stamps, but created another mandala style, but slightly smaller. Using your smaller stamps this way is where you can really play, bring you into your stamping or your pattern building. You can change the scale, put the stamps upside down, build outward as much as you like. It can be very calming, satisfying technique because you're building it intuitively, and that's really, really freeing. I mean, the second or third time you do a pattern, you'll be able to repeat it a little bit more quickly. But the first time is about looking at the shapes you've got and how you can combine and work them together. I hope that makes sense, and it doesn't feel like I'm just waffling for waffling's sake, which I do anyhow. All the different designs have been made using the smaller elements. No big focal image needed. And it really shows that the potential in some of these smaller stamps, how we overlook them and how possibly we pigeonhole them into just one role when they can take on many more. So I have gone away and coloured it just to give you an idea of what the pattern could look like. However, using the same sort of layout or just juggling the stamps around, we can create a mirage of different patterns. We can do one that looks like this by adding in the leaves, or I can create it on a jelly print so it looks completely different again, colouring it with metallics, using inks at the same colour, and I've added in a few sequins. The first pattern, I've actually cut it out so I can create a 3D project with it, or I can get even bigger and stamp in white and colour in on a black art journal page, and that was just using the two patterns that I've covered in today's video. If you enjoyed the video, I'd love it if you give a thumbs up. Thanks so much for watching. I hope this has given you some ideas for looking at your stamps a little bit differently.